Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Colwood Council. I'd like to call the regular council meeting for Monday, June 24th to order. First of all, our territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples of the Kasepsum and Songhees nations, whose historical relationships to the land continue today. May I please have a mover and seconder for approval of the near long-term agenda and adoption of today's agenda of regular council? Okay, Councillor Grove and Councillor Olson. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. Mayor's message. I have just a couple things to announce. First of all, I'd like to say that the city of Colwood's very proud to have honored the National Indigenous Peoples Day last Friday at Royal Roads. We were one of the co-hosts around the region. Apparently there was about 6,000 people that attended that gathered on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples. And it was an excellent event. You know, there was a lot of Indigenous heritage in the culture, lots of food, music, and workshops, activities, and connections. And we had our own boat. We had our City of Colwood. A lot of the senior staffers joined in the traditional canoe welcoming on the shores tradition. The second thing, I'd just like to say this Friday, June 28th, the city is hosting a volunteer night music in the park. And so I'm asking everyone to come and join us at Herm Williams Park from 5:30 to 7:30 for an evening of music and community connection. Get a chance to chat with city staff, some of council, and different various community groups. And there's lots of opportunities to win prizes at this event. And at this point in time, I'd just like to, I'm going to go to Councillor Day, who has, she's going to just do a quick update on an event that she attended. It's the Safe for Schools event, and it's on our ongoing support for youth safety as part of our long-term agenda. Anyways, I'll turn it over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you. Just wanted to update you that the City of Colwood did host an event at the Legion, invited representatives from around the region where we heard presentations from Safer Schools Together and West Shore Parks and Rec members who have been facilitating the youth evenings at West Shore Parks and Rec. And it was centered around the community that youth find themselves in, which includes Instagram and other technologies that maybe elude myself and others of my generation somewhat, to understand what is driving kids to experiment and dabble with gang affiliations and how they get connected with those things right here in the little old corner of Southern Vancouver Island, and how it sneaks into our lives and can present some real challenges for families, and allow children to get involved in things that they had no idea that they were getting involved in. It was an excellent presentation put on by Safer Schools. Originally, I attended a similar workshop with the Mobile Youth Services team, who talked about guns and gangs in our community. And you may notice it on the news that we see more and more things are happening in our community, and how we can safeguard our kids is really the focus of that event. And if you don't know about it, you can't protect yourself from it. So it was a really excellent event, and I will in future share the report I wrote from the last event to help you understand that culture is here and it's prevalent and it's trying to prey on our kids, and we need to be aware and try to prevent its influence. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Day. I'm going to move on to adoption and receipt of the minutes. May I have a mover and seconder for the adoption and receipt of the minutes in item 4 of the agenda, please? Councillor Ward and Councillor Olson. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. We'll move on. Public participation. We've had 2 written submissions that were received after publication of the agenda, and they will be appended to the agenda tomorrow. And both those letters were actually to deal with the Langford Tennis Club. I was told it's maybe the West Shore Tennis Club. Members of the public will now be given the opportunity to present concerns or ask questions. You have a time limit of 2 minutes, and if I can, I'll invite the first people up, please. Carol, please.
Carol Brown, CENIC. I am so pleased that this evening we will have a presentation from Patrick Dijak on housing the climate crisis and using nature-based solutions or nature-based infrastructure in our development planning. Patricia Dijak has a degree in electrical engineering from the University of Victoria and over 30 years experience in product marketing for telecommunications, energy management, and GPS companies, working with customers in North America and Europe to reduce energy use and carbon emissions. She has recently completed UVic's UN-certified Transformative Climate Action Program with a research focus on housing and natural infrastructure. When reviewing Colwood's strategic plan, low carbon resilience climate action report, and our natural asset initiative, I feel thankful and proud to be living in a city that recognizes the need to move ahead, to do some things differently than we did in the past, and to achieve positive climate action goals. Colwood was the first CRD municipality to declare biodiversity and nature-based solutions as part of its climate change and low carbon resilience strategy. Tonight, we're going to hear of methods for achieving these goals. All CRD municipalities will be updating their OCPs by 2025. And in order to meet new density requirements, it is important to incorporate nature-based solutions into multiple sections of the OCP. Developers will then have clarity from the start. Just one last thing. Our urban canopy is not just to make Colwood look good. It is necessary to make our city livable for the climate changes our children and our children's children will face. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. Anyone else from the public? Sorry. Yes, it's on.
Hi, I'm John Ferguson, 39 Seafield. I actually came to speak in support of Councillor Ward's motion for altering speed limits within Colwood. However, I would like to ask, can we do more of Colwood than just Royal Bay? My street too is 5 metres wide with scallops, limited visibility, and I think Fangio drives a blue Mazda. There are people doing it at what appears to be 70 km an hour, and the traffic calming just doesn't work. We've approached the council many times over the years, and we've had a distinct lack of engagement. And we would like to support this because we feel it's only a matter of time before one of our kids, and there are lots of kids on my street, reaches an unfortunate conclusion with a motor vehicle travelling way faster than they technically should. So thank you. What a great idea. Can we just do some more of Colwood?
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else from the public? No one electronically. Perfect. Okay, I shall close down the public participation portion of the agenda, and we'll move on to delegations. And I understand, Carol, are you going to be introducing Patricia Dijak, or?
CENIC is so happy to have Patricia here this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. And Patricia, you have 10 minutes.
Thank
Just so
you.
you know. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just checking to see am I controlling the slides? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. For this presentation, we'll look at the housing and climate crisis and how density and biodiversity can be achieved together. We'll look at new global and local standards for urban planning and next steps for Colwood. This information is based on a global consensus by organizations like the UN, BC Government, Union of BC Municipalities, Natural Assets Initiative, Stewardship Center, KPMG, and FEMA. And as Carol said, we'd like to thank Colwood for committing to low carbon resilience and nature-based solutions with biodiversity supports on public and private lands. So first, what are nature-based solutions? They're natural and modified urban ecosystems that are planned together with built infrastructure from the start of any project. They do not increase building costs. They just affect the footprint, format, or siting of a building. They save taxpayer money and support our economy because they filter pollution and protect us from flooding and dangerous urban heat islands. And they're as essential as hospitals because they supply oxygen and clean air and water. Here's a standard natural infrastructure diagram from Vancouver. On the left is pristine wilderness, and on the right is an urban area. In the past, the focus was managing nature on the left in isolated parks and environmentally sensitive areas. But this has just made our urban heat islands and biodiversity crisis worse. So now urban plants and trees are seen as critical corridors to biodiversity hotspots. But plants cannot succeed without wildlife like insects, pollinators, and birds because they distribute pollen and fertilize the soil. And in turn, wildlife depends on 3 layers of vegetation to survive: trees, shrubs, and ground covers, as you see in the diagram. So along with biodiversity, nature can provide us with cleaner air. It can reduce healthcare costs, reduce burdens on stormwater systems and BC Hydro, and protect our tourism-based economy, which depends on outdoor recreation and wildlife. So what are some examples? Here's a building in Toronto that's designed with nature in mind. And the one on the right is in Victoria, and it's not considered climate resilient. There are no setbacks for trees. It's directly exposed to road noise and pollution and costs more to cool and heat because it's 12 to 15 degrees hotter in the summer and colder in the winter due to wind exposure. So overall, higher cost of living and lower quality of life. In Langford, neighborhoods like these are 12 degrees hotter than treed areas. This man was concerned about his neighbors with mobility issues that would be trapped indoors at 45 degrees or have to pay high electricity costs for air conditioning. Also imagine all these families with kids driving to parks, increasing carbon emissions because they have no green space. The CRD also acknowledges the links between land use and climate change and the need for regional watershed protection and climate adaptation planning. Another critical fact, as you may know, is that the CRD is in the smallest, most endangered ecosystem in BC. The only place in Canada it exists, the coastal Douglas fir zone, with Gary oak and arbutus habitat outlined there in red. It's mostly urban with 75% of BC's population. There are no remote CDF forests to protect. Most of Vancouver Island is in a different zone, coastal Western Hemlock. And 80% of the land is privately owned. So with 30 to 40% canopy targets, we must include nature on private lots to meet our goals. Here's a BC government map with a close-up of how small the CDF zone is in yellow. If we don't include nature on each private lot, we face massive extinctions like the western bluebird that was extirpated from the island in 1995. So action number 1 for Colwood is updating the OCP, and Colwood can plan natural and built infrastructure together without affecting developer costs. The health of our region depends on this. First, let's compare BC housing guidance with its climate adaptation guidance. For example, BC's setback minimums are 2 meters, but climate adaptation strategies show we need room for trees. A tree is 5 to 6 meters wide, and a vehicle averages 5 to 6 meters long. So with 5 to 6 meter setbacks, you get trees and shrubs and ground covers and a parking space, a win-win opportunity for all of us. Also, BC's maximum coverage doesn't account for impermeable surfaces, which is a problem too. So what can we do with the OCP? We can include objectives for nature-based solutions in multiple chapters like growth management, climate change, park areas, and built and natural infrastructure. And every new development should meet these objectives, not only in environmentally sensitive areas or development permit areas. Again, this saves taxpayers money and only affects the footprint or siting of a building, not developer costs. So far, 35 BC local governments have completed natural asset inventories according to national accounting standards. And one example is Nanaimo. Nanaimo has reclaimed Buttertub's Marsh throughout its downtown. It now attracts 75,000 tourists per year and locals, bringing money into the economy. The engineered asset cost to replace its flood management function alone would be $4 to $8 million. Now, if we look at the Latoria Road developments in Latoria Creek, as Colwood stated, the use of Latoria Creek Park is expected to increase significantly in the coming years because Royal Bay doesn't have mature trees yet, and the park depends on the health of Latoria Creek. So far along Latoria Creek, there are built infrastructure plans, but no integrated nature-based solutions plan. The Canadian Standards Group says that nature-based solutions plans require development strategies that consider flooding and erosion risks and broader river and watershed health. Here's the vision. In terms of nature-based planning, both the road and development seem a little close to the creek. Also, impermeable parking lots and trees surrounded by concrete could create an urban heat island, deter wildlife, increase flooding and erosion, and cause pollution runoff into Latoria Creek. An environmental report pointed to high risks to the creek. What changes could help the economy similar to Nanaimo? For example, we could make the building footprint smaller with the same number of units, or use grass pavers for parking, or more vegetation to reach 30 to 40% canopy targets. These types of actions could save the health of the community, wildlife, and Latoria Creek Park, and you may have considered these already. For comparison, let's look at Vancouver's plan for Yukon and 63rd. Buildings are set back from the intersection to allow room for nature. Trees, shrubs, and ground covers provide homes for wildlife, clean air, and physical and mental health. Bioswales filter pollution. Or this development in the Netherlands, all the buildings and roads are planned to support the health of their waterway, called their green-blue heart of the neighborhood. All the multi-unit residential buildings have front and backyards with trees and green space. Gathering places are nature-focused, not large concrete plazas. This is what it looks like at street level. Setbacks are 5 to 6 meters with room for parking, trees, and shrubs. Again, that's a new development. What are some details needed in the OCP? We could specify 40% natural and green space for new developments. This would meet our targets for 35 to 40% urban canopy and wildlife corridors. It would allow 60% for the total of building footprint, parking, and walkways and patios. And open space could be specified as green, not hardscape. We need to define amenity cost charges that could include park walkways and wildlife corridors, not just recreation facilities or libraries. Front and back setbacks need to be 5 to 6 meters to support trees. And landscaping guidelines could include 3 layers of vegetation, including and also permeable pavers. Action number 2 suggestion, we need to create new land use advisory panels to review development applications. Currently, these panels typically contain built infrastructure experts with financial, real estate, and architecture backgrounds. We need to have at least 30% nature-based solutions experts. And action number 3, public incentives. would be great, like tax rebates for replacing impermeable surfaces and replacing lawns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Any questions from council, please? It's a great presentation. Thank you. Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. As I stated before, any councillor can remove any item off the consent agenda, and it doesn't require a seconder. And so I'll open the door right now. I think Councillor Olson, you're ready to take something off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd like to remove 7.3 for discussion off of the consent agenda, please.
Second. Okay, we don't need a second. So that'll become item 9.4 under new business. Okay, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please? Okay, Councillor Grove, and second by Councillor Olson. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. We'll move on to notice of motion. Councillor Ward, this isn't to be debated. This will be debated at the June or July 8th council meeting, and it's on the speed limits and design in Royal Bay. And if I can get you to read your notice of motion. Councillor Ward.
It's a little wordy, Mr. Mayor. Maybe I'll try to abbreviate slightly. Essentially, I'm moving that the city of Colwood commence planning and work to reclassify the residential streets of Latoria North and South. That's colloquially known as Lower Royal Bay, into 30-kilometer-an-hour zones with appropriate communication and signage in support. And that Latoria Road from Machosen to Quarry Street in the westerly direction be designated a 40-kilometer-an-hour zone, reflective of its intersecting a high-density, family-oriented neighborhood with frequent pedestrian crossings. And the motion goes on to seek that the high-volume intersection at Ryder Hedgedal in Latoria, site of an unfortunate pedestrian vehicle collision just days ago, be equipped with leading pedestrian interval signalization or redesigned as a pedestrian scramble, something befitting its place as a multi-directional pivot point in the heart of Royal Bay and only to get busier. And further that we investigate speed reducing devices such as mats or reverse speed bumps, raised crosswalks, cameras, etc. For safety purposes in Latoria North, South, and on Latoria, in recognition of the inability for the RCMP to obviously be there on a 24/7 basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ward. So I look forward to that at the next council meeting. So we'll move on to new business. And first up, Rick Smith, a bylaw officer, bylaw activity report from January to May, I believe.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present the bylaw activity report from January 1st to May 25th of this year. As part of the council expectations in the annual service review, our bylaw services team is asked to provide a report of comparable annual stats for complaints we receive from our community and where we provide our service reactively and proactively to ensure that the bylaw service team is aligned with council's expectations. There are 15 bylaws generally enforced by the bylaw services team, and they are mostly dealt with on a reactionary basis, that is reacting to a complaint that is received. However, some are proactively enforced. Performance and key stats for the first few months of the year. So far, we're up to 279 complaints. The complaints, as you can see, are quite frequent, and the highest one, as per usual, is our traffic and highways bylaw with a count of 171 complaints so far, with noise violations coming in second at 27, totaling the 279 at the bottom. Proactive and reactive enforcement. The proactive side of enforcement includes our building bylaw, the traffic and highways bylaw, the urban forest bylaw, the parks bylaw, and overnight parking down the Esquimalt Lagoon. Now these X's can be moved at councilor's discretion. So if you want something moved to proactive, you move the X and so forth. As for tickets and warnings, there is one error on this outdoor burning. There should be one ticket issued for outdoor burning. So a total tickets is 13 and warning issued is 31. And if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them.
Thanks very much, Rick. Open it up to Councillor Jensen.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Rick. Help me out a little bit. Traffic with parking / work on city property without a permit.
Correct. That's under our traffic and highways bylaw. Under our traffic and highways bylaw, there's parking issues like fire hydrants and such, stop signs. But there's also working on city property, city boulevards without permits. So that's all encompassed in the traffic and highways bylaw.
So we're talking about frontage improvements in
Correct.
people's
Yep.
houses where they're piling big
Yes.
rocks and.
Yes, or depositing materials on the highway and such.
Okay, it just seemed odd that that's captured in one section, but I understand it's all in the traffic bylaw.
Yes.
This is great. I appreciate it. Thank you. And I think what pleases me is the fact that you guys certainly take the low road as far as issuing warnings, because it far surpasses our number of violation tickets issued. And I think that reflects well on the city, that we're here to see compliance, not to
Exactly, yes.
wield a big hammer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Day, please.
Thank you. I'm curious what the process would be to move something that's currently being reactively enforced to being proactive.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, that would have to be a discussion through mayor and council, come to a decision, and then we just start enforcing it as per your direction.
Then I will just leave it with the mayor that I would really like us to talk about our dust control bylaw, especially in the summer months, being moved to a proactive stance. We've had a number of complaints. We're dealing with construction close to other currently existing residential areas in many cases in Colwood. And I think it's something that would serve us well. I'm not asking for more than what the bylaw, what we are led to expect when we have applications come forward. But I would like to be sure that we are following up on that and making sure that we're keeping the dust down and the roads clean so that it can be as less inconvenient as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a couple quick questions from me, Rick.
Yes.
So if you were in my shoes right now and you're a smart guy, you really are a smart guy. I'm just trying to figure out, what do you see, what story do you want to tell us with these measurements? Is there better measurements that we should be looking at? You know, if you were the person, I know you're giving us what we asked for right now.
Correct.
Is there something better, like something that can make us a little more, so we can, get ahead of things instead of look at history all the time? And so that's my first part of my question.
I think the way things are going are good. I mean, we're very proactive with the traffic issues and with the expansion of Royal Bay, it's just adding on to that. And with any municipality, parking is the #1 complaint. So, and it goes for that here. So as long as we can stay up on top of things traffic wise, and the people do phone in and we can get the job done for our residents, we're in a right direction for the traffic for sure.
Okay, super. And this, my second question is part of that first one right now. I guess how I look at this right now is I trying to figure out like the quantitative numbers that you stuck up there, and I don't know if that's good or bad. I would assume some of the small numbers are good, but are even our bigger numbers, are they bad? Like, is it telling us something that we should be doing? So I guess the question comes down to, is there some type of national index that, that comparators that people have for each of the towns and municipalities?
I don't know if I don't know if there's a national index.
Okay.
But the way Colwood is growing, parking, that's going to be the #1 complaint for years to come. Developers want the bigger lots, smaller roads, so that is going to be always #1. As for others, such as noise and all that, actually the construction noise has come down. Out of these complaints, it's been more people with their radios on, the nicer weather is coming now, so we'll get more of that. That's gonna pick up. But I'm really surprised that the construction noise, like working after hours or before construction times, has dropped. So I'm hoping that's through our education process with our builders down in Royal Bay and elsewhere in Colwood. That's what I'm saying it is anyways. So I think Colwood's on the right direction right now. And it's something to look at every year, to see what we could change or how we could do things better.
Thank you very much. Councillor Day, I was just wondering, oh, sorry, I'll go to Councillor Jensen and I'll come back to you again. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just had a thought along the lines of your question. What I don't see here is where, and this is just food for thought. It's a little bit random, Rick, and I apologize, but it certainly doesn't account for what you've done proactively. For instance, we've done this many park patrols, that didn't result in a warning or a ticket. So, maybe some kind of metric like that shows how you preempted some of our issues with your proactive work that apparently we've anointed for some of these issues. I definitely don't want to see you doing proactive work in firearms discharges. We'll just leave that one alone.
I can say through the chair, this time of year, once the weather warms up even more, we're very proactive in our parks, like Esquimalt Lagoon, even a quick drive through, you can see stuff going on. So once they see you out and about talking to people, that sort of calms things down. And we also hit Lookout Lake once the weather's a bit warmer. And
I only mention that as maybe another column in here. We've done this many dozens of patrols and, there was no outcome. So there was no measurement. And I think what that reflects is, it's the whole trying to capture how many bylaw offenses did you prevent with your active patrolling? And the answer is who knows? Here's how many patrols we did, right?
Yes, that would be a tough stat.
Just food for thought. Thank you, Your Worship.
Be able to add to that. Good evening, council. So definitely the purpose of this would be to, we expect that this could evolve the process as it goes on. I mean, parking is a really good example, as Rick mentioned there, where this year we are going to paint a picture for where our parking is at in Colwood, and at that point, it would probably make sense to split those up a bit, because as you mentioned, it's a bit of a blur between activity on the street and parking. So we could come back with those separate to paint more of a clear picture. And as an example, say for example, the parking at Coburg Peninsula, it does paint a picture of how many complaints we receive, how effective that proactive management is. But we should, and we could paint more of a picture for what we approach proactively that might not show up on presentations like this. So we'll do that next time.
Thank you very much. Great. Okay, let's see, no other questions. Thank you very much, Rick. Great report. And this was for information only, so thank you. And next up is Sandra Russo, our communications manager, and give us our annual report. Sandra.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just have the annual report for you to review. As you know, it's legislatively required that municipalities present an annual report by June 30th of each year for the previous year. We also need to place ads in the paper 2 weeks previous. So ads were in the paper on June 12th and 19th. Recently, we have received no feedback about the report to date. And so I present it for you for your receipt. Happy to answer any questions if you have.
Thanks very much, Sandra. It was a great report, by the way. And I will open up the questions. Councillor Jensen, then followed by Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you. No questions. Feedback, it's excellent. And every year, I mean, it's super glossy and there's some great photos. And I mean, it reads well. It's easy to read. And it certainly, I think, reflects our community quite well. And kudos. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Councillor Ward.
I'm just going to sound like a broken record. I was going to say it's really well done. And I think, even though there's no feedback, I mean, that drives everybody crazy, I think, in the corporate world and in this world. You put all this time and effort into putting something out there that's informative and, you know, and it's an attractive piece and it's educational, and you hear nothing, crickets. But I think there's a silent majority that does take it in and appreciates it. And, you know, and I think that's important to remember. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, clearly it was a very busy year. So there's lots of accomplishments here. And I think this was very well put together and all very positive. I think the only thing that would have been helpful for me was to list the accomplishments under the defined council expectations, just to see how we're doing. I think that would have just sort of helped me a little bit in going through the document to see, oh, these were our expectations and here's what we've accomplished. Just that might help a little bit. I'm not sure how you would structure that, but I thought it was very well done, and thank you for all the work that you've done.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. Those council expectations are quite new from the service review, and so that's something I hadn't thought of, but I think we could do that. Thank you.
Great. Again, thanks very much, Sandra. Great job on that. We're really well done. Thanks. And that was just for information too. And now we go up to Kathy McClellan and our Sophie.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is that time of year where we annually present the Statement of Financial Information that is legislatively required within 6 months of year end. There are 2, 4, 6, 7 schedules that we repeat every year, and they are presented for you in this report and schedules. And the recommendation is that the Statement of Financial Information be approved, and that the Mayor, Director of Finance, and Manager of Finance be authorized to sign the schedules. And I'm happy to answer any questions should you have any.
Open up the floor for any questions on the Sophie itself. Councillor Jensen.
Sorry, no questions. I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. The seconder. Councillor Grove. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kathy. It must have been that good. Well done again this year. Really proud of you. Okay, now we go on to 9.4, which was moved from the consent agenda. And I'm going to ask Councillor Olson just to motivate right now for pulling it from the consent agenda. Councillor Olson. Whoops.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to move the recommendation with an amendment to the second part. And so what I'm looking for here is for the committee recommendation, the second part, to read that the installation of the wooden signage donated by Mr. Aubrey not be deferred. And shall I carry on? And
Please, you go ahead.
Sure. I just want to give a little bit of context. So I do sit on Heritage.
I guess I should ask for
Sorry,
a seconder first.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Grove, please. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So again, just for context, I sit on the Heritage Commission. And while I was not physically present at the last meeting, I did watch it online. And it was very clear to me in watching that meeting that the room was seeking a motion to make an amendment to the recommendation to defer the installation of the donated gate. Pardon me. And I think many people here will know Mr. Aubrey has a significant personal connection to the cemetery grounds. He has spent a lot of time, personal resources and money in the creation and the construction of this beautiful gift. And so I do personally feel that to defer it is somewhat of an insult. And I really do think that we need to consider the kindness behind this donation and this gesture, and move forward with the installation of the gate. And I know that Councillor Grove attended the meeting in my place, and so I think he might have a few words to comment, I'm sure. And so thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Before I go to you, Councillor Day, I'm going to go to the seconder, Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was in the room, and yes, the decision had been was a little divided, but there was a lot of support for this notion of having it go ahead, the installation go ahead as we're discussing. There's quite a bit of support in the room.
Thank you very much. Councillor Day?
Nice.
Thank you. I very much torn by this issue. Have been involved with both of the cemeteries in the past, as well as with St. John's Church and its revival for its 100th birthday. I'm also aware of some of the challenges with the older cemeteries and the changes that have come into place legislatively for their management. And I think probably the Heritage Commission, out of an abundance of caution, would prefer to have a plan first and put up the sign after. And that may be for very good reason. There could be some, there could be that over time, things aren't maybe where we think they are. So I really appreciate the gift that Mr. Aubrey has worked so hard to create to give back to the city, and his personal connection with the cemetery. But I think for myself that I would prefer to be sure before I put the sign up that everything is appropriately placed. And not because I don't want to have the sign, only because I want to make sure that it doesn't create problems in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to make a comment? Oh, Councillor Wilson for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that I can appreciate where you're coming from, and I understand the mechanics behind having the cemetery management in place prior to accepting a donation, and how are we going to look after it and who's going to look after it and maintenance and such. But I very strongly believe that this is one of those scenarios where I think that we need to make an exception. And I do feel strongly that we should go ahead with the installation, but I do appreciate where you're coming from as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grove for the second time.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just might add that the sign as it's designed is being planned, has been planned by a person with connections to the cemetery, and that historically this is what this cemetery has experienced with other signage, information boards, and as historically as it goes, it's a family member run kind of changes that took place. So the question of the heritage appropriateness or some such discussion isn't really in place here. I would also then mention that as time passes, there's certainly will be opportunities to make further changes. So I support the notion of having this sign be put up now, again, also in light of the Aubrey family's involvement and the donation.
Thank you very much. I guess I'll just sum it up here. I had the opportunity, Mr. Aubrey made a point of making sure he contacted me. And I can tell you, it's a very, very highly charged emotional situation because it does involve his family, and there's a lot of history with his family. And, I guess his aunt was, their family built the church there, or the old community center. And, I've never seen, like, I know Mr. Aubrey, I've talked to him a lot of times before. He always volunteers his time over there. But he was totally incensed. I can tell you that right now. And, I'm not going to say it's a threat or anything, but, he basically said, that's it. I'm going to bring the sign over here and put it in your parking spot and burn it. That's how angry he was about it. Now, I calmed him down quite a bit. Now, I understand it's the time too, because apparently he's been told by the time it gets through all the process, it's probably a year away. And that's what just absolutely made him blow up. And he says, that's unacceptable. I have more that I want to contribute financially to this. So I do understand his anger. And I sort of look at the risks myself. I'm with Councillor Grove and Councillor Olson on this, that, I thought, well, what is the risk? What is the real risk here? And I'm of the, in my own opinion, is I would support the motion that's on the floor right now. So that's my own conclusion on it. Councillor Jordison.
I guess I don't know the situation in its entirety, but I don't think that Mr. Aubrey would have just gone about and created this sign just on his own and said, here, I'd like to have this installed. I think that they're along the lines with some direction given by the city to proceed. So I think if anything, this should be used as a learning opportunity, if you will, that we need to get our checks and balances in line before we proceed with certain things. But I think you're very right that this should go ahead and the sign should be put up because that's what Mr. Aubrey was promised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other discussion, I will call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Oh, it's unanimous. A motion carries. And on the original motion as amended, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Motion carries. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we shall move on to bylaws. Okay, bylaw number 2018, the land use amendment, that's 2346. And I just want to point out this one. I'll save Desiree from coming up here. This motion is just to rescind the first and second and third reading that was given May 13th of this year. And it was just due to an error in public notices. That's all it was. So at this point in time, if you have questions for Desiree, it was, like I said, it was a timing issue. So if I can get maybe a motion just to approve first, okay. Councillor Ward, second, Councillor Olson. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Motion carries. Okay, bylaw number 2005, land use bylaw amendment number 207, CD 39, 3494 Wishart. Again, is Kelsey here tonight? No, is someone ready to speak on this one? Yeah, again, another, it was pretty straightforward in the report, but basically it was for future subdivision of lands. But if you want to add anything to it, John, I thought it was pretty straightforward in the report.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have anything to add at this time.
Okay. I'm looking for a motion. Okay. Councillor Ward and then Councillor Grove. Discussion. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to move it. I looked into this one and through, as Chair of Land Use and Planning, we'd approved this. Obviously, as a council, we've approved it. It's really, as it states in here, just a technical change, just dividing it up because of the way the road bisects it. So I was prepared to speak to it if necessary, but I don't really think it requires it, frankly.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're gonna see no other discussion. I'm gonna call the question. Any opposed? Seeing none, it passes unanimous. Thank you very much. 10.3. Matt, you're on board. This one's gonna require a little bit of finagling here, so go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So today I'll just be giving a brief presentation on the proposed amendments to the off-street parking regulation bylaw number 1909. So the amendments include regulations for EV-ready infrastructure in new construction and reduced regulations for parking stall sizes. So the staff recommendation is that council consider giving first, second, third readings to the off-street parking regulations bylaw number 1909-2, which includes EV ready parking regulation and omnibus amendments. So the city's strategic plan for 2024 to 2027 includes pathways that promote environmental stewardship, fostering a resilient economy, enhancing community well-being, and strengthening partnerships. These objectives are supported by the proposed bylaw amendments that require new developments to provide infrastructure for electric vehicle charging, which encourages investment in clean energy, improves access to EV charging, and and through this, we engage with stakeholders. So as you all know, Colwood is growing and attracting new development, and it's important for us to plan for the future transportation needs of the community. Electric vehicles offer significant benefits for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, improving air quality, and saving on fuel and maintenance costs. However, one of the main barriers to EV adoption is the lack of available and accessible charging infrastructure. So to address this challenge, the proposed bylaw amendments will require EV-ready infrastructure in new multifamily residential construction. So the proposed bylaw would require that new construction support EV-ready infrastructure, which includes the installation of electric capacity and electric vehicle energy management systems. This is based on best practices from other jurisdictions and addresses the increasing demand for EV charging and the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It would also bring Colwood closer to alignment with regulations in neighboring municipalities such as Langford. Oh, sorry, one behind. So this slide covers, oh, no, sorry, all screwed up. Sorry, so this slide covers the requirements for the EV parking in new buildings containing apartment units. So all parking spaces, excluding visitor parking spaces, must include conduits capable of providing wiring for a level 2 electric vehicle charging. So additionally, there's requirements for building permit applications and prior to issuance of building permit. So these regulations would ensure that new multifamily residential buildings have EV charging infrastructure in place that supports future charging stations should those buildings want to move forward with that. The other amendment is to parking space size and aisle dimension. So this table here is kind of in red is the existing dimensions that are in the current bylaw. The black numbers represent the overall changes. So it should be noted that the key changes are mostly to the width and length of the parking spaces, and then the rest of the numbers represent the calculation of how those would affect the total parking module. Parking module represents the space needed to accommodate 2 rows of parking and a drive aisle in between. So as you can see, the main change is the width from 2.6 down to 2.5 meters and the length from 5.8 down to 5.5. So these changes would result in significant cost reductions and still providing flexibility for developers to include larger stalls if they wish. And then this slide here is just showing typical vehicle dimensions. So as you can see, with exception to large pickup trucks, all of the vehicles are well below the existing requirement of 5.8. And then 2.5 is the proposed width, and everything is under that as well. So we worked with the Urban Development Institute after the introduction and adoption of the parking bylaw back in 2022. So they conducted a review of the parking bylaw and made recommendations to staff for amendments, some of which included the inclusion of EV-ready infrastructure regulations and the parking space size reductions. So staff evaluated this letter, undertook a best practice review with additional research and evaluation. And we determined that the letters attached to the report, but it's extensive work needs to be done on some of the other elements. So these are the ones that staff felt we could bring forward at this time, and we'll look at other elements of the letter at a later date. So the proposed amendments currently, the EV charging ones align with the city of Langford. So that provides consistency for the West Shores development sector. So the proposed amendments, as I said, for the minimum parking stall sizes, They're supported by staff based on the understanding that the current bylaws can increase the cost of, our current bylaws increase the cost of building structured parking, and they're not consistent with the regulations in nearby municipalities. So making these changes will help lower the cost of parking and also keep promoting structured parking over surface parking. So structured parking is better and more efficient use of land and will hopefully result in a decrease an increase in affordable units. Sorry, I'm trying to not cough. All right. So introducing EV ready parking regulations would support the city's climate action goals and over time reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector. With an increase in car dependence, mobility fuels are the largest source of emissions in Colwood. By providing EV ready charging infrastructure, the city can facilitate the adoptions of EVs and encourage a shift away from fossil fuels. This aligns with Colwood's climate action plan and the provincial Clean BC plan. Okay, so next steps. The climate action plan includes the adoption of policies that support a shift towards sustainable transportation and EVs. Adopting these preliminary EV regulations as proposed would be an early step towards facilitating the shift. Regulations for EV ready infrastructure in new construction will be implemented pending the adoption of the amending bylaw. Finally, additional options and policies will be developed for council through the Colwood building retrofit strategy, which is scheduled for completion in Q1 of 2025. These are the options for council as outlined in the report. And in conclusion, the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw support the city's goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by requiring EV-ready infrastructure in new developments. This will enable more residents and businesses to access EV charging stations and facilitate the adoption of electric vehicles. The amendments would also create more efficient use of parking spaces and benefit the environment, economy, and community. By adopting these amendments, the city would be better positioned to be a leader in climate action and innovation. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just going to get a drink real quick.
Hey, questions, Councillor Jensen?
Yeah, thank you. I feel like you could have brought that with you, man. But anyways, a couple things. First off, we talk a lot about electric vehicles, but we don't speak to electric bicycles, electric scooters. Like it's almost in isolation. I mean, is that deliberate? Do we speak to? And I mean, I'm sorry, but you know, these $10,000 electric bikes that are all the rage nowadays, you know, they're being used to whiz into town. So does this bylaw account for that, or is it somewhere else in our bylaws as far as what our expectations are, or do we have any expectations for those alternative electric vehicles?
Thank you, through the chair. So that's one of the elements that's in the UDI letter, that because of the general size of EV bikes, it just takes a little bit more evaluation from a staff perspective to determine what the requirements are going to be, because those take up space in underground parking spaces. So it's something we're definitely looking into. It just requires a little bit more research into exactly how we're going to fit those into our building footprints.
So I don't see them taking up, I guess I mean, it's great if you have two of them and you park them in your parking spot. I mean, that's deluxe, and you probably charge them all day long with, you know, the chargers, but presumably they want more security. So those things are all going into an additional room somewhere near the parkade. And do our bylaws speak to that well enough? What our expectations are as far as, you know, capacity? And I just picture an octopus of plugs and one 15 amp circuit and a whole bunch of electric scooters.
Thank you, Ann. Sorry, so we do have, is that 20%? Yeah, so we do, that's my mistake. We do have a 20% requirement currently. But it's something that we can look into expanding on, to increase that percentage.
I don't want to muddy this
Yeah.
bylaw down specifically, but it just, we always talk about electric vehicles, and I think the definition is expanding. And it's gone are the days when we can speak in isolation about just a Nissan Leaf.
Yeah.
Now, people are gravitating to these expensive bikes because you can whip downtown in no time flat at 60 kilometers an hour. Now, I am going to take this opportunity to push back a little bit. Of course, the Urban Development Institute says our parking spots are too big. And I'm sorry, but the F-150 is still one of the most popular selling vehicles in North America. And it concerns me if we're getting too close to the dimensions of an F-150 in an underground parking lot. I just wonder if a risk or an adverse side effect here is that all the F-150s, with presumably a 300 unit building, will have 50 or 80 F-150s according to the stats, and then they're all parked out along the street. Can you speak to that? I'm sure you guys have flushed this out around the table, but I mean, what's the risk, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Through the chair. Yeah, in terms of the actual painted space, obviously the dimensions are a little bit smaller, but they are consistent with Langford, View Royal, all of which have F-150s, and I don't know of any of
And lots of parking issues, I might add.
Yes, lots of parking issues. Agree. I guess in a sense, they would hang into the drive aisle a little bit, and the drive aisle that we have is 7 meters, which goes beyond engineering standards. So maybe a few conflicts, but I don't the spaces wouldn't be able to accommodate them. It's just more inconvenient, I would say. But it is consistent with our neighbors.
So you better be a more precise driver is what you're getting at.
It would make it more challenging, but I don't think it would make it impossible to park in those spaces.
Because the next thing you know, the Urban Development Institute says our garages are too high now because it's all electric vehicles, so we can reduce the height by 3 feet and save that much more concrete. It seems like a never-ending circle, and I do know, because I've spoken to people from the Urban Development Institute, they feel that our parking guidelines are too much, that we have too many, and we're at like 1.2 or 3 or whatever it is per unit. So I guess it's the gift that keeps giving, the Urban Development Institute and some of this stuff. And so it does concern me a little bit. And I like all this work that's been done, and I'm supportive of everything that's here. But I guess those are just some of my concerns.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Jensen. Councillor Day.
Thank you. Quick question. The one thing that I didn't see in any of the dimensions was accessible parking. Are you reducing those sizes as well?
Through the chair, those spaces would remain the same as what they currently are.
All right, thank you. And I hope that we're working on finding a better way to describe where they should be, because you want your accessible people close to your entrances. It's challenging enough to get in and out when you have a mobility issue that requires that you get a specialized parking pass to use those spaces. And also the one thing that I have seen going in Langford recently that I think is a good thing, and that Colwood tried to do, I think it was back in 2006, and that is to get Moto car share co-op spaces into our buildings so that we can have, actually, very smart young person that I know was moving to our region and said, well, they must have Moto out by you guys by now. And I said, unfortunately, not us yet. But for someone who's environmentally responsible and needs to move into a home somewhere in the West Shore, and generally speaking can take transit, but wants the option to occasionally be able to use a vehicle for those trips that don't work well with transit, Moto is a great way to go. Was that considered at all?
Thanks, Matt, and through his worship. So this was an issue that was very much, it was a priority coming out of the initial conversation about parking going back a few years ago. Staff met with representatives of several car share organizations, including Moto. I think the last time we talked to them was 2022. We reached out last week. His worship actually talked to us about this opportunity, and we've got a meeting in the next couple of weeks to investigate further. The previous conversations led to Moto explaining that they didn't feel they had the necessary ridership potential in our area. But the hope is that that's changed and we can get some more car share out in Colwood.
That sounds awesome. I think it would be a really great thing. And in Langford, even right on Goldstream Avenue, they have designated electric parking stalls for Moto installed. So great opportunity, I think, for Colwood to both have parking and cars without people necessarily having to have car ownership be a burden to them. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I just have, I know this bylaw is speaking about providing the conduit or EV ready. The result then would be a building presumably that could have 100% EV owners living there, which would then require a more power supply to the building. So does this cut back through to the power supply to the building? So we don't have issues where all of a sudden the building can't add more because there's not enough juice to the building, because you hear that every now and then. Does this speak to that, or anyway?
Through the chair, there is an amperage requirement that's part of the bylaw. So that's based on what the building would be able to produce.
Would add up to, so
yes.
that these would all be included as if installed,
Yes.
even though they're just ready. Okay. And the management systems I understand today that are evolving manage that charge demand anyhow, and timing and sharing of, yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much.
Okay. Councillor Jordison.
I just wanted to support what Councillor Day said about the Moto, and I think that's a great idea. I think today's young people, they don't really necessarily want to own a car or have the insurance responsibilities and that sort of thing. So having that available is really a great thing. But I support Costco size parking spots. Those are the best size for everyone. Oh, thanks.
Any other questions? Would anyone from council like to make a motion? The recommendation, Councillor Grove, okay, seconder, Councillor Day. Discussion? Okay, go, I'll ask the question then. Any opposed? Okay, Councillor Ward is opposed. Thank you. We shall move on. 10.4. Okay, this one's a simple one too. I'm not even going to call up staff. Again, this was, we already gave this the first 3 readings to the bylaw. And then we had to submit it to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and the Inspector of Municipalities has now granted the statutory approval. So now we can go to final reading here. So would anyone like to make the motion, please? Councillor Day, second by Councillor Grove. Discussion? Seeing none. Any opposed? Seeing none, unanimous. Motion's approved. 10.5 bylaw 2037 Parks Acquisition Development Cost Charge. Get Matt to. Nope. Nope. That was roads. Yep. Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Let's see if I can do this without getting super nervous again for some reason. So I'm here to introduce the draft report for the Parks Acquisition Development Cost Charge Bylaw, which is a key tool for funding the acquisition of parkland in our city. So the staff report provides an overview of the draft park acquisition DCC program, the proposed bylaw, and the consultation process that we went through with stakeholders. The DCC bylaw was developed with growth information from the city's housing needs report and the official community plan. Park acquisition projects are based on the Parks and Rec master plan and the amount of parkland needed to service future growth. The development of the DCC program was guided by the following objectives: to ensure that the park acquisition DCC program is consistent with the official community plan and the Parks and Recreation master plan, to ensure that the DCC rates reflect the current and projected costs of acquiring parkland, and to ensure that the DCC program is fair, transparent, and equitable for all stakeholders. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank the consulting team from Urban Systems, that's Sean Heffernan and Samantha Bowen, for their hard work, expertise, and support during the development of the Park Acquisitions DCC bylaw. Sean and Sam have been working closely with city staff to develop the Parks Acquisition DCC program and have extensive experience and knowledge on the creation and implementation of DCC programs. So on that note, I'd like to invite Sean Heffernan, Senior Local Government Advisor with Urban Systems, to do a presentation that will provide more detail on the draft Park Acquisition DCC bylaw and how it was developed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, man.
Hello, Council. Thank you for having us. Myself and Ms. Samantha will be presenting to you tonight. Yeah, we have a fairly lengthy presentation. If there's any urgent questions, feel free to jump in. If not, we'll have some time at the end for questions. With that, I'll let Samantha kick us off.
Thanks, Sean. So just to briefly overview what we're going to be talking about tonight, we're going to quickly review the current status of DCCs in Colwood. We're going to provide a quick refresher on DCCs, review how the program was developed, discuss the proposed rates, some key considerations involved in the DCC, and then identify some next steps. So as a reminder, the City of Colwood currently charges DCCs for park improvements, roads, and sewer enhancement. And there's also a regional water DCC, which is the Juan to Fuca water distribution service that is charged by the Capital Regional District. So we'll now provide a quick refresher on DCCs and discuss how the Parks Acquisition Program was developed. So just at a very high level, DCCs are one of many development finance tools, with each community often using multiple to achieve their goals. This is just an assortment of some on the screen here. And essentially, DCCs, just to do a quick refresher, they're provincially regulated fees that help communities recover the costs of offsite infrastructure needed for growth. They're intended to be transparent, equitable, consistent, and fair, following the principle that growth pays for growth. And they're typically charged at one of two times, either at subdivision or building permit when the number of units is known. So when you're calculating the DCC rate, it's always done through the same series of steps as outlined in this slide here. There are a series of technical inputs such as estimating growth, determining capital cost and timing, as well as benefit factors, followed by the preparation of the municipal assist factor, which is a pure policy decision. And all of that leads to the calculated DCC values. So in preparing this particular parks acquisition program, the following work was completed. So we determined project timing and priorities over the 20-year time horizon of 2023 to 2043 based on where growth is occurring. We then determined eligible DCC projects based on where new development is occurring over the next 20 years with inputs from the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, park management plans, and insight from city staff. And then after that, we determined the relative benefit of each project to the existing community versus new development, the proportion of capital costs attributable to new versus existing development, and taking into account any developer contributions. And I'll pass it over to Sean to talk about the project list.
Thanks, Samantha. So within our project list, we have identified 9 park projects in alignment with Parks and Recreation Master Plan. These are distributed across Colwood. This results in a total DCC program value of $48 million. So in that, we've also accounted for developer contributions that have been determined through existing municipal development agreements for several of the sites in Beachlands, Olympic View, and Royal Bay. So those costs were not included in the program, and I'll show how that breaks down later in a couple slides. So as we noted, each project has, once they've been determined, the eligibility has been determined, they're assigned a benefit allocation. And that is the proportion the project benefits new versus existing users. So in looking at the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, it was determined that there was a certain quantity of parkland that would be servicing, the existing population, as well as another proportion that would be servicing future populations coming from future growth and development within the community. Benefit allocations can range from 0, which would not be a DCC project, to 100%, which would be a full DCC project. And in this case, we determined that the majority of parks would have a shared benefit, approximately aligned with the proposed population change of Colwood over the time horizon of the program, being approximately 50%. So 50% was assigned as the benefit allocation for all the park projects in the program. There's also the municipal assist factor, which was noted earlier. So again, this is a pure policy decision that is entirely at the discretion of council. Essentially, in legislation, the Local Government Act provides the ability to vary the amount of DCCs by increasing the DCC municipal assist factor. So it's important to note that any increase in the municipal assist factor will have the effect of reducing the overall DCCs, but it will also increase the proportion of monies paid for by the city in contributions to those projects. The municipal assist factor can vary from a minimum of 1% to a maximum of 90%, 1% being the lowest, 99% being the highest. You can vary this by infrastructure category, and we're only talking about parks acquisition today. But essentially, it's a decision of council if they wish to alter the DCC rates by increasing that assist factor. Just a quick overview of stakeholder engagement. So we undertook stakeholder engagement on March 25th. Again, this is a recommendation of the best practices guide. In this consultation was held with the developer community, representatives of the UDI, local builders and developers in the city of Colwood. It was a good discussion. We have reviewed the project list. We outlined essentially changes and other considerations we made based on any feedback provided. And through that discussion, we received feedback from the developed community essentially regarding the proposed DCC rates. Again, they proposed that, more rates include more costs, which affect the viability of some of their projects potentially. And that there's the need to kind of appreciate the balance between those lands being given through the development process and the ability for developers to access DCC credits when they deliver parkland on behalf of the city in alignment with the DCC program. So there's good discussion around those pieces too. They also suggested that there's value in conducting economic analyses around fees and charges to determine impacts, which is another consideration we took in going forward. Proposed DCC rates. So this is a really quick breakdown of the program. So from that 48 million that we identified in total DCC costs, as I noted, 15 million of that, or 31%, is actually being provided through existing developer contributions through those municipal development agreements. 34% of those costs, so 16.3 million, is DCC recoverable, which means this is what is going in to actually generate the DCC rate. The remaining 16.6 million is the responsibility of the city of Colwood. So this is to cover that other 50% benefit allocation. So when we look at the total 48 million in project program costs, it's split about a third between existing contributions through development agreements, developer contributions through the DCC program, and contributions from the city of Colwood. This results in a total DCC acquisition program and rate for low density residential of $2,900 per unit. $2,537 per unit for medium density, $1,631 per unit for high density, $10.88 $10.88 per meter square of gross floor area for commercial, and $5.44 per per meter of gross floor area for industrial. Just to kind of walk through the what this means in terms of residential comparisons for Colwood compared to other communities in the region, and as well as the Lower Mainland and interior. The proposed Parkland DCC rate, when combined with the recently approved Parkland Improvement DCCs, so you have 2 DCCs for park, with those combined, your rate is near the high end for Southern Vancouver Island, just slightly ahead of CENIC. It comes in well below some of the other communities in the Lower Mainland, like Abbotsford, or the interior, like Kelowna. Also to note that those communities with the gold stars next to them are undergoing DCC updates, so many of these DCC values are expected to change in the near future as well. So there will be some other communities having higher DCCs to come. And this is what happens when we kind of merge it with the other DCC costs that the city currently has in place for transportation and sewer, and as well as the regional DCC for water. So again, Colwood's sitting relatively in the middle of the pack in terms of Southern Vancouver Island, and overall in terms of the community comparison communities that we are showing here. Just a couple additional considerations. So once the DCC program is adopted, so if it's given 3 readings here tonight, you'll have to go to the province for ministerial approval. That can take several weeks, and once there's kind of a 4th reading and adoption, each developer with an in-stream application will be given 12 months protection from the new DCC rates. And this would be given to any developer with an in-stream application that could either be a building permit application, application for subdivision, or what's referred to as a precursor application. So this could be a rezoning or development permit or development variance permit application. So they then have a 1 year to achieve either subdivision approval or building permit. So I've just kind of walked through this piece right here. The other is consideration for DCC waivers and reductions. This is another discussion that has come up in similar DCC programs around the option to waive or reduce DCCs if there are certain types of eligible development council would wish to see. So you can waive or reduce DCCs for 4 categories of eligible development in alignment with the Local Government Act. This would be not-for-profit affordable rental housing, for-profit affordable rental housing, small lot subdivision designed to result in low greenhouse gas emissions, and development to result in low environmental impact. If council chooses to waive or reduce DCCs, again, it is recommended this is done through a separate DCC reductions bylaw to be introduced after the DCC bylaw. And that in terms of the waivers and reductions, that would be required, there'd be a requirement to define what development would be eligible and portion DCCs to be waived or reduced. Just a quick overview of next steps. Again, we're bringing bylaw forward today for 3 readings. If given 3 readings, it would be sent to the ministry for review. Once that is approved, it would be brought back to council for 4th and final reading. Thank you very much. Answer any questions.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. My question is, how do we add new parks to the list? So earlier tonight, we had a presentation from CENIC, and basic gist of that presentation was that in order to be resilient to climate change, we need to incorporate more parks and green space and allow more room for trees and adequate setbacks to keep the green, but still make room for buildings. So how do we add those to our bylaw? Is it a simple bylaw amendment, or is it a big rigmarole process as well?
Through the chair. Yeah, there's a few options for adding parkland. Essentially within the DCC bylaw itself, they are living bylaws that should be reviewed and updated, every 3 to 5 years to ensure that they remain consistent. New projects are added on, old projects are taken off. It's a requirement within the DCC bylaw itself and the legislation that any parkland added to the program must be owned and capitalized by the city. So I know there's maybe opportunities for sharing other types of park spaces, but this would specifically only apply to the lands owned by the city. So yeah, that would be a process. You can do minor updates, but you can't really change the project list at that point. So you would be required to do a major DCC update to add new projects to the program. And though not now that the bylaws, if it is established, would kind of set the stage to do that easier in the future. But there would still be the need to have consultation, the readings of the bylaw, ministerial review, and adoption of that revised bylaw. So there would be a bit of effort to redo it.
Yeah, DCCs take a little bit more to understand what it's going to take to fund them for sure. On the list with the comparison for development cost charges, it puts Colwood pretty much squarely in the middle, less than Fuca, less than Langford, but more than, well, Gold Star on Victoria as well. So they're obviously redoing theirs as well. But and our DCC bylaws have taken us a long time to get to. I think it's just been one of those things that could be put off. So it was for many years. Can you just speak to, I just find it interesting that just a couple of items before on the list, our developers are complaining, your parking costs too much to build. And then we look at our development cost charges and they're quite a bit lower. So there's always two sides to every coin. But can you speak to the Colwood being in the middle of the listing that you provided?
Sure. Through the chair. Yeah, I mean, they're constantly changing, as you can see from that bylaw. Like many of the bylaws are changing, and those that haven't changed for a while will actually probably be set to increase pretty substantially because of especially when it comes to parks and the change in the cost of land that's occurred over the last 5 years, right? So if it's been 5 years since a community's updated its bylaw, they're going to see that those acquisition costs go up. So yeah, in terms of being in the middle, I think I think it's good probably not to be too low or too high. It's an important tool to fund your infrastructure and your parts network and cost share those projects with developers. So yeah, it's a fine balance, I suppose.
Thank you.
Your worship, if I could just add to Sean's response to Councillor Day's question. So this council is aware the city in the historical context has taken community amenity contributions on a development by development basis. So that was how a lot of our future needs relative to parks and other community amenities were intended to be paid for. As council also knows, a lot of those community amenity contributions aren't indexed to inflation. So by bringing DCCs to the table, we're looking at a more effective way to plan for the financial needs of the community. I'd also like to mention that we're going to be bringing forward a proposed new charge that would be enabled through the recent legislation, Bill 47, that was passed by the province. So that would also provide for things that aren't currently covered by development cost charges, and we'll be able to put in context for council all of the different things that we're charging from developers, and then the capital needs that they will be going towards in hopefully one presentation.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I don't see any other lights lit up, so I just take the opportunity to move 3 readings of the bylaw.
Thank you very much, Seconder. Councillor Jordison. Discussion. I'm just going to make a comment. It's just unfortunate there's no other way to raise revenues. Like, well, I guess if we got really inventive, I guess there'd be ways to do this. The unfortunate part about DCCs, is it saddens me because it's the people that pay for it, the very people that are the young people. And it just saddens me. It really gets me because, you know, we talk about this and, you know, there's no other way that we can do this. You know, if someone is genius that can tell me, but it just saddens me. It's just that we, you know, if it's not this one, it's other DCCs, you know, it's just sad to me, you know, so it's just a commentary, but I know what we're doing is right for the city as a whole, but it's just a sad state of affairs. Anyways, on that note, I will call the question. All those in favor of and any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Okay, move on to 10.6. Could we do both bylaws at the same time? Okay, bylaw number 1949-1950, sewer local area service enlargement amendment, bylaws for first and second, third reading. Can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Day and Councillor Jensen. Discussion? Seeing none. Any opposed? Seeing none. Motion carries.